All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So you're in the panel called Mobile Face-Off, HTML5 versus native apps versus mobile development platforms. So we're going to have a big fight. It's going to be really entertaining. Thank you for coming. This seems to be a really popular debate right now in our industry, at least in the mobile industry, talking about what types of ways should we be thinking about building applications. Should they be HTML5 and the emerging web standards in the browser? Should they be native applications, or should they be something else? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and get some different perspectives on that. I think it's going to be very controversial. That's what I'm told. So my name is Jeff Haney. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Appcelerator. We've got Matt. It's going to be the Jeff and Matt show. So Matt Ellman from PayPal and Matt Geiger from eBay. So kind of coming two different perspectives. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those are. So the big question that seems to be that we're all grappling with is native app or mobile website. That seems to be something that there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of different opinions about which we should be thinking about as an industry, and really specifically what you should be doing as a company and how should we think about that. Okay, let's see if we can go in the right direction here. So from my perspective, I'm going to spend a little bit of time and just talk about a couple of perspectives to frame the debate. I sort of think about this question a little bit more like email or chat. Chat came along a long time ago. Email, of course, preceded that. Now we have things like Facebook, Google+, which I'm not sure if anybody uses, but we have a lot of different things out there in the world, and I think that this question is probably a little bit, from my opinion, a little bit like email or chat. I think both are extremely important. Of course, there's Twitter or Facebook. Quite not the same. It's not quite apples and apples. Or you could say PayPal or MoneyWire. Each one has a different use case, different kind of trade-off. We're going to talk about some of those today. To put some of this in context, at least looking at what's happening in the space as far as consumption, mobile web is starting to surpass at least the engagement factor, people using application endpoints versus the web. Now, part of this is, I think, the form factor. Some of this is technology, and some of this is certainly has nothing to do with any of that. It's just simply the behavior that's been created by the App Store and changing dynamics as far as the consumption and marketplace. But we are starting to see big trends in the economy as far as how people start to use engage with content, and certainly apps are starting to spend more time there. Of course, I think everybody, we've talked about this a lot. The PCs are now being outstripped and outsold by smartphones, tablets, connected televisions are coming, surface computing, telematics, lots of different types of screens beyond our desktop and beyond our laptop that are really going to impact this as well. And of course, apps is really eclipsed music. Music was the first big digital consumption device, millions and billions of downloads. The first 10 quarters launch, at least from Apple's standpoint, apps are now eclipsing that and downloading. Certainly not a apples to apples comparison, but certainly a trend that we're looking at. So we like to think about it really in a couple different choices. I think on the far end of the extreme to the left, you have native applications. And thinking about what is the definition of that, it's really native codes running inside of a native container or a native application running on a device. On the far end of the other side, you've got mobile website. That's a complete application or a website rendering inside of a web browser container. So kind of two ends of the spectrum. There's also a new concept that a lot of people in the industry are using, which is called a hybrid app. And that's really a web view or a web page being rendered inside of a native app container. That way you can mix and match sort of the UI capabilities of HTML with some of the device or the container download capabilities of the native app. And so this chart sort of illustrates what you're trading off. Certainly on the user interface side, there's different types of devices beyond iOS and Android. We're seeing Windows 7, Windows 8 coming out with their new tablets soon. There's a whole bunch of others, but sort of focusing on the two predominant ones in the new smartphone. And hybrid apps allow you to sort of also mix and match certain device capabilities. So the idea is that you can potentially, for some types of use cases, you can get actually a good combination of the two. You can leverage some of your web rendering or web UI, but you can also access some of the device capabilities. So these are some of the different choices, I think. Just a couple, I thought I'd spend just a couple minutes, my own plug. AppSeller, we really help. We think that you can actually do all three. All three are very important. We think that it's not really an either or. It's like saying that the web is dead and that native apps is, we think that's a fairly silly debate, much like the email chat debate. Or Facebook, you're going to stop doing email because everybody's going to do Facebook. I think some of the things are going to change to some degree, but it's really in the margin. So we really think you can build great applications using both and using web technologies. And just a few good examples of top brands, top applications in the App Store. These are great. These are all built with web technologies, but they're not necessarily HTML5. So they're actual native applications built on top of web technologies, but compiled and built for native applications. And of course, number one app in the App Store is the MVC app that came out recently. It's a good example of a really great, rich experience built with web technologies, but actually running in a native application and mixing and matching sort of HTML5 presentation for some pieces, but native UI for other pieces. And with that, I'm going to sort of turn it over to kind of drill in a little bit to some of the pros and cons, some of the different experiences these guys have. One on the HTML5 side and another on the more native side, and talk a little bit about pros and cons and their experiences in building applications and kind of limitations. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you. Also, just one more thing. These little slides are kind of small. They put them up here last minute. There's an XMob, I think, is what it says in the front. If you want to tweet questions, we'll have people in the audience that are going to help us. At the end, we're going to do a Q&A.
Thanks, Jeff. So really quickly, let me introduce myself. My name is Matt Edelman, and I've been a web developer at PayPal for about 4 years and a mobile web developer for a couple of years. And I'm proud to represent the mobile team here today. It's a great honor to have been asked to represent, the HTML5 part of this debate. And I talked with Matt yesterday, and he's really passionate about native applications and the development of them. And I've had some experience with the Titanium product as well, the AppCelerator product. And if you haven't stopped by their booth, I would recommend that you do so. I think it's a really good way to get into app development if you're a JavaScript developer. You don't have to learn Objective-C, you don't have to learn Java, you can just kind of get going right away. So that's a plug. So let's see. I gave myself some notes here. Let me see. Introduce myself. Okay. 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 So like Jeff said, it's not a competition. It's not an either or. It's not do I do native applications or do I do a mobile website or mobile web application? I think you really have to think about the device and how people interact with it and how they get places on the app. Like a lot of times you'll be browsing on your Safari. If you're using an iPhone, you'll just be browsing for various reasons. So the quickest way for you to get content in that instance is to end up on an HTML5 application or a website. And other times, if you need to use native capabilities of the phone, then it's going to be a native application that you're going to want to use. So I would argue that you want to have both. You really, if you need a native application for whatever reason, but you're also a web presence right now, if people seek you out in a web browser on their desktop, they're going to do the same thing in a mobile phone. They're going to look for your website, and depending on what they see, that's going to be sort of your first touch point with them on their mobile device. So let's just walk through a quick example. Let's say that I need a new FireWire drive. So I do a search, and I click on the first result, and it looks really big up there, but picture it on your phone, right? If this is your first touch point with this particular merchant, I would just go back. I'd start again. I'd start the search again and look for another site because I feel like, okay, they're not concerned with the mobile experience, so I'm just going to start again. So further down the results, there's a buy.com link, and I click on that, and I get to this website, and it's optimized for my phone, and it's got nice big click targets. What I see, the first three things are at the top, and I say, great, I want the first one. I click through. I skipped a couple of steps. Add to cart. check out with PayPal. So I'm still in the browser. And I get to this screen, which is the Mobile Express Checkout product, which my team worked on over the past couple of years, and we're continuing to add features to it. If you have a PayPal account, we'll just assume that we do. We'll log in. And part of HTML5 is that you're going to have AJAX interactions and nice smooth transitions and a good clean design. And I get to the review screen. And then I click continue, and I'm done. I'm back on buy.com, and I've done everything in the mobile web browser. There was no friction. There wasn't a big, upsell banner on the buy.com site that says get our application. That's kind of a stop for some people. They see that kind of landing screen where there's no website. It just says we have an app, so why don't you download it? Or there's a link at the bottom that says, or you can click here and go to our full site. So I think that this experience is good if you just want a frictionless, purchase for the buyer. So that's basically why you'd want to have a presence on the mobile web is for that frictionless experience. People are going to get to some property of yours on the web, and you should be there. Actually, let me back up. Am I back? There we go. So other scenarios where you might want to drive people directly to some sort of web property would be like if you're doing a QR code campaign and you just want people to take a picture of it with their phone and go straight there. It's another, no need to go download an app. You just go straight to a website. And if your website has some capability but you want to tease to a mobile app, to a client application, a native application, then I think that's a good way to go. You can have some capability on your website and then say, by the way, if you want more capability, download our application. If people are reaching you through social channels, people still post hyperlinks, right, on Twitter, on Facebook, any number of places. They're going to click through. They're going to end up on the browser. So those are some other scenarios where you say, you want to have a web presence. And again, there's no friction of an app install. And the other thing, which is it's not a small point, is that you can reach people that don't have an iPhone or an Android or whatever platform you're developing for. Those are the top two, obviously, but there's people with. How about just for a show of hands, who in here doesn't have an iPhone, Android, or BlackBerry? The proud few. So, I mean, in other places, like if you ask that question in a room in South America or Asia, you'd get a different result. And I know there's some web developers at PayPal for some reason. They still want to stick with a Palm Pre, and they're attached to their browser because that's how they reach most of their content. In terms of capabilities, what HTML5 can do, and I didn't want to do like a deep dive into all the sort of the names of the tags and the names of the technologies and so forth, but what it does is it fulfills the promise of the browser that's always been there, right? It's a window outside of your computer to all these, all this content all around the world that just has to conform to a basic standard. And it doesn't matter what your operating system is. It just matters that you have a web browser. So that's the promise of the browser. And what it kind of adds to that is it lets the browser perform, right? It allows the browser to do smooth transitions. It allows the browser will allow your site to know where you are. You can do location-based stuff now. And with some of the CSS and JavaScript additions that kind of are encompassed in HTML5, you get clean transitions and touch. So you can do touch, drag, pinch zoom and that sort of thing, swipe. And the design, you can do it without all the images that you used to have to do. So if there's a lot of web developers here or web designers, you know that 10 years ago you had to create little images for all the corners and you had to lay things out in tables and all this ridiculous stuff to get your brand to look right. And with HTML5 you can just use CSS and do all that without images, which means you can have a fast site. So basically someone should be able to look at your property within about 5 seconds. That should be about it, and that's less friction than installing an app. Again, though, if you do need the capabilities of an application, upsell it from your mobile website. And it's easy to say these things. a colleague of mine pointed out yesterday that, it's easy to say, yes, we need a mobile site, we need an HTML5 site, but, the business is the business, and you have to prioritize. So sometimes you can't just do everything you want to do. And I'll just use PayPal as an example. A lot of the web developers at PayPal desperately want to, optimize the site for the iPhone and the Android and phone browsers. But still, this is where we're at. And we're working on it. It's on our roadmap. But this is I think a lot of sites you'll see this, and you got to get the app basically to really use the functionality of PayPal currently. But again, we're working on that, and just keep in mind that it's something you should put on your roadmap and not be afraid to do it. But it could take time. It's just not a matter of like, do I do a client app or do I do a mobile app? You kind of have to think about both and think about how people are going to interact with your brand. And that's it.
Thanks, Matt. Let me see. Uh-oh. Okay. Thanks. I'm not a Windows person.
Yeah, hit it again, and then you should be able to.
Yeah. Thanks. Good. And F5, please. There we go. Hi, my name is Matt Geiger, and I work for eBay, senior software engineer. I've worked on a number of projects before and during eBay. The Android eBay Core app, PayPal Android app, and before that, other things such as Chegg. And I have some experience with JavaScript and HTML5. I've also written websites, most notably Earth Browser, which was the first virtual Earth. So I'm kind of coming at this from a very developer-centric position, and I have very strong ideas about what should and shouldn't be done in an app. And when I see JavaScript as your programming language, I feel, that's just another layer between you and what you're trying to get done. So that's kind of my position. And after taking a look at some of the new capabilities of HTML5, as well as Appcelerator, which is an excellent environment, I've kind of softened my stance a bit. So I've also added a ton of crazy transitions just to make myself a little more entertaining. So what is a native app? It's written specifically for a mobile device. So you're going to have a set of code for iPhone, which is usually Objective-C, but you can also do C or C++. For Android, it's usually Java, but you can also do C. If you do want to support multiple platforms, you are going to have separate code bases, though, because they aren't unified. There's no Java really on the iPhone. I think there's some people trying to do that. But you're best off doing Objective-C, because then you don't have that layer in between you and the SDK. So what else is a native app? It has to be installed to run. You can't just find it on the web. And you have to download it from the App Store, which also means that you have your business has to go through an interface of Apple as an app store or the marketplace in Android's case. So what are the benefits? They have access to all of the features of the device, such as the camera, the gyroscope, the accelerometer, and all the new stuff that's coming out as well. And under the hood, I'm not sure how technical this audience is. I kind of rewrote my presentation based on the idea that, hey, actually, maybe these guys aren't developers here. So native apps aren't for everybody. If you're doing something simple, just repackaging a website or something that's very easily done in JavaScript and HTML5, you should explore that first. And if you find that your mobile app, your mobile site is doing well, then perhaps consider another solution, such as upping the ante and getting yourself a native solution. Also, another reason is if you don't need third-party devices. If you want to integrate Red Laser and scan barcodes, You're not going to be able to do that in HTML5. If you want to use OpenGL, your best bet is to do a native app. If you want to do camera, push notifications are actually a really important thing on mobile. They really increase the engagement between the customer and the user, and the business. I know AppCelerator is a nice hybrid solution which enables you to do that and also continue to write in JavaScript. So another major factor for your business is, do you have experienced developers that can learn or already know these technologies? The number of JavaScript engineers and web designers are vast compared to the number of iOS or Android developers. Oop, did I push that? So what are the disadvantages? They're very expensive to have a developer develop a native app for you. You know, upwards of $100 an hour at least. You have to have more than one code base if you want to support multiple different devices. There's also that interface between the app stores. You have to sign your code. There's an approval process with iOS, which is the biggest platform, and you may be rejected. It introduces uncertainty into your product release cycle. Also, it increases the delay between updates, which is the slower update cycle. So who should create a native app? If you want the best possible mobile experience, you should create a native app. If you have the development experience or a team that can execute on that within a good time frame, then it's definitely the way to go. One of the big advantages is if you're on the web as a mobile website, you're out there with a billion other web pages. On the App Store, sure, there's half a billion or 500,000 apps, but you're much more likely to be noticed. People are looking for apps. They want to see you in the App Store. Push notification marketing is huge. So on the eBay Core app, before we did push notifications, we got a lot of throughput. Once we introduced push notifications, we notify near the end of the auction, and also if you've been outbid, and that tripled the number of conversions in the eBay app. So it's extremely significant. You're also going to get the best performance and experience through a native app. People kind of feel like they're mushing through something on a website. The whole thing redraws. Native apps, you don't have to worry about that. There's smooth animations and transitions. It's the best of breed experience. So companies with resources for a mobile engineering team should seriously consider either hiring some mobile developers that have Android or iOS experience, because that's going to get you this best of breed. If you're just experimenting and dabbling with, hey, what can mobile do for me? Maybe you should start with an HTML5 or an AppCelerator solution. One of the best things about native apps is there's a huge set of developers out there talking constantly. Every day I look at stackoverflow.com and find a solution to my problem. There's just a lot of people out there doing that kind of development on that platform, and there's almost always an answer to your question. And the debugging is far superior than debugging through JavaScript. That's just my opinion. I'm sure other people have solutions for JavaScript debugging, but debugging in a mobile browser is frankly a nightmare. Okay, so what are the advantages? Raw speed. You can do complex data processing. Try and do an Instagram in HTML5 or even in JavaScript in AppCelerator, and you're just not going to get decent performance. I mean, you can write it in native code and wrap it in AppCelerator. I know that's possible, but still. If you're going to do any kind of complex data processing, like in the eBay app, we have a lot of timers and a lot of threading going on where you have to pull services. There's over 100 API calls that eBay uses. And the ability to combine all those in a real-time fashion without delays, have things going in multiple threads at the same time, it's only possible in a native app. So you also have access to the device features like the camera to do red laser, where you can scan a barcode. push notifications, which I've already mentioned. You also have networking, threading, and security features, which, I mean, there's HTTPS for HTML5 apps, but that's not a real security model. Also, another big thing is, if you're online, you're on a plane, you're not going to be able to use a web app. So hybrid solutions like AppCelerator, they alleviate a lot of the issues and enable you to get to a lot of the device-specific features. You can target multiple platforms in one code base. That is kind of the key, I feel, to their business proposition is write once, run in multiple places. You have access to the device features, and there's plenty of JavaScript programmers out there. A lot easier to find talent. Disadvantage is you still have to write device-specific code, because to take advantage of some of the features, you're going to write a branching statement to go for iOS, one for Android. And once again, I guess I can't stress enough as a hardcore developer, speed of programming, networking, complete control over the networking, threading. You don't have to worry about memory fragmentation as much. I mean, that's all up to the developer themselves, actually. And you're not going to come out with JavaScript leaks a lot. So you're kind of constrained. You may crash, and you don't know why. It's hard to debug memory issues in JavaScript because of the garbage collection. And that's it.
So we're going to open it up. I think we're running a little bit over time, but since we started a little late, they said we could go over a little bit. So I think, thanks, I can see now. If you have any questions, maybe raise your hand. I think there's also some people walking around with iPads that have been looking at the stream. Okay, there's a question in the back. They're going to come with you for a mic.
Hello. Hello, hello. Hi, I was wondering about the, we've been using, we're going down the direction of HTML5, but we're trying to figure out with the different JavaScript frameworks how those work with HTML5. As a designer, I'm attracted to the gestures that they afford you in terms of the more mobile types of form controls. They have a very data input intensive application. But I'm not clear how much sort of engineering overhead that layer will add as opposed to just a basic HTML5 presentation layer.
Which frameworks are you evaluating?
There's the jQuery one and Sencha are the two that come to the top of my mind, but there's at least 4 or 5 more, and I can't think of them now, but we're evaluating several.
Okay. Well, my best advice would be that you should prototype in all of those if you have the ability to. Just kind of think what are some basic performance metrics that you need to meet, and make some simple prototype using each of those, and kind of create a criteria set that you can kind of say yay or nay on each one. I know in our company we've had a similar bake-off between those two, and we chose one, but we decided to reverse engineer certain features of the other. And that's one of the advantages of JavaScript frameworks, as well as that the code is very visible. So if there is something that you like from a framework and you just want that, it's possible just to take that. That's what I would say.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. I'm interested in putting a podcast in one of my tabs, and it would be like a 2 to 3 minute video that would be downloaded. They wouldn't be able to view the video unless they downloaded it, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
You talking about in a native app or on a website?
In a native app.
Yeah, in a native app, you have the ability to use networking and stream, or not stream it, but download it to the local file system and play. Are you worried about security, or? I mean, the advantage of a native app is everything's packaged, and theoretically, you can still sniff the protocol, but theoretically, you're talking between the web server, and there's no visible source.
And how about for a web app?
A web app, there is visible source. So, there's plenty of solutions out there on the web today with one-way tokens and things like that you'd use on any web browser, in a desktop for streaming audio or streaming video. So you'd have to employ some similar technique.
You mentioned it's hard to debug and test. So in your experience, how close is Safari on a Mac as a simulation platform to debug the JavaScript and things like that?
Actually, it's pretty. That's the best way to do it, and it works pretty well. If you want to, if you're developing for iOS, a mobile app, a web app, you can just use the Safari on a Mac, and it works pretty well. And there's some other tools as well. There's Winery in particular. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a remote debugger that basically puts a debug console on your desktop browser while it's communicating with your mobile browser. So your mobile browser is actually sending AJAX calls back to this console, and it's like debugging on the desktop. There's some capabilities that aren't there, but you can do a lot with it. I mean, it's still a work in progress, that sort of thing. Debugging JavaScript on the phone is difficult, but yeah, you can use Safari as a good simulation.
But if you use Accelerator, we have a Eclipse-based debugger, and it's all built into Eclipse, and it's a typical debugger code walkthrough, even if you're running on device or simulator. There's one right here.
Thank you. Jeff, maybe you can address this. What is your rebuttal to Matt's indictment of HTML5? And Christian was sitting up here until a few moments ago, and he presented in this room yesterday all of the amazing things that we could accomplish with HTML5 and CS3, and talking about local data, video, layering, performance. And I assume your developers and your customers are looking at that to get some of those performance realizations with HTML5 and with the web tools and with your toolkit. So is there a response there?
Just to be really clear, Accelerator is not running HTML5 when you build a native app. You write in JavaScript. There's a JavaScript engine. It's an all-native UI. You're programming against a Titanium API, which is a JavaScript. So if you're familiar with Node.js, you're programming in JavaScript. It's running a physical native application that's compiled and packaged. It's not running an HTML WebKit-based UI. When you build and target for HTML5, it is running HTML5. So the same API, same application will run against the CSS transformations, and it's actually running against the JavaScript API. And the UI is physically being rendered as HTML5 and runs in a mobile website, mobile web browser. And then the hybrid is a native app container. So it's a native app, but with the UI piece is actually running. And that's more of like if you're familiar with PhoneGap or some of the other solutions out there. That's what the hybrid would be. That's creating a web view. You could do hybrid as well in Objective-C or Java. You would create a UI web view, for example, in iOS, and you would load HTML content into that web view. And that web view could be half screen, it could be full screen. It doesn't matter. So I think just to clarify, much different. You've got access to OpenGL APIs. You've got access to things like Red Laser and the Accelerator for the native side. So you've got full push notifications, full API set in against the native capability. So it's more of an 80-20 solution than it is an HTML5 and a native container. But I think that I don't think this is there is no HTML5. It's underway. There's a set of recommendations, but it hasn't progressed to the proposed standard yet by the W3C. There's a bunch of various extensions. That's part of the problem. CSS transformations up until recently didn't work at all in Android. They work great in iOS. So there's a lot of kind of things that are happening in the industry. There's a lot of extensions to the spec that are going through review, and there's a lot of wonderful things that are coming in HTML5 as a standard. But certain things, like Matt said, I mean, if you need to do barcode scanning or you need to do proprietary DRM on the device or you need to do things like that, you just can't do those, and you probably never will be able to do those in HTML spec. I mean, HTML is where you've got 100% agreement between a bunch of different vendors that you can actually implement. And so I think it just really depends on your use case, ultimately. Were there any questions on the Twitter stream, I think? No? Okay, good. That was not useful. There was a question down here, I think. Hold on one second. We're going to bring you the mic. They were recording this.
I have two real quick questions. Does PayPal run on native or HTML5, could native and HTML5 interact with each other?
Currently, the PayPal app that you would download on your iPhone or Android is a native application. You can have a hybrid app where there's communication between the web view and the native application. Both iPhone and Android have a method for you to do that using JavaScript or the location hash. You can send messages to the native application and get it to do things.
Would it encrypt it to?
Well, so the web UI instance is on the physical phone, so the UI browser or the browser can communicate to the native app through hooks on the native app side. So it doesn't go back to the web server in those cases, like the location hash or the callback API.
Thank you.
There's another question over here on the right.
Hi, Salim Aj with Mobile Breeze. It's actually more of a comment than a question. Just for audience benefit, there's also other solutions beyond Titanium. There's like Chrono SDK. For people who know Lua language, it does the same thing. You write in Lua and then compiles to native, both on Android and iOS. So you can create native apps much easier than trying to learn Objective-C and worrying about learning both Objective-C and Java. But all the solutions at the end of the day don't give you all the full native utilities of the app. So in this sort of a world of a very, very highly competitive app market, your app needs to really, really stand out. And to do that, you probably have to really milk everything you can to build a really, really good sort of product. I mean, the best example is the Instagram, the photo space. That space is so competitive now, and every day these developers are coming with a lot of new algorithms to really milk the entire CPU power. And some of the code actually has to be done in assembly for even faster performance now to get this really, really cool quality. And there's no way you can do it with HTML5 or even do it in Titanium or even Chrono. So if you're really serious about it, the native app sometimes is the only way you can go right now.
Yeah, just from that standpoint, for Accelerator, not to make this an indictment on Accelerator, but in Accelerator we do have a module SDK, and so you can actually write, we have a iPhone SDK and a Eclipse SDK, so you can actually write modules, the very specific code you might need to actually be in native, and you can still write your app in JavaScript. And that's, for example, how OpenGL works. That's, for example, how Laser works. That's how a lot of things work in Titanium, actually. The whole API is written in the same SDK. So, but I agree, the same would be true for Java. I mean, if you're doing real-time computing, up until recently, you didn't have a real-time timer in Java. You actually had to do that in C++ or assembly. So I think everything in technology, you have to make trade-offs based on what your requirements are.
So I wanted to know if all three of you guys could agree that it really does depend on the use case. Our friend over here was just describing an extreme example, like it can only be done, this can only be done this way. But there are, I think all three of you spoke to the same concept, which is that depending on the use case, one is actually better than the other. It isn't all or nothing for either thing. It just depends what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
Also, just your business capabilities. If your business doesn't have the expertise to do the full-on, native experience, then you shouldn't try to tackle that. Maybe take baby steps, and if it really pays off, then step it up.
All right. Any other questions? One more.
With HTML5, is it possible to do drag and drop on all operating systems and for all browsers? Or are there limitations with the Mac? Or is that even possible on an iPad?
That's a good question. I would think it's possible on an iPad because you've got the same basic events that you can utilize. So I would think so. When you say all operating systems and all browsers, that's a little bit trickier. But I think if you're just talking about iOS and Safari, then the answer would be yes.
Yeah, only up until recently, we do a lot of work on WebKit. Only up until recently did drag and drop actually work across both Chrome and WebKit, especially when we actually absolutely contributed a bunch of patches to WebKit for Linux for drag and drop. So on the desktop, so certainly drag and drop in the mobile context is a lot different because in iOS, there's no concept. You're in one window at a time, so there's no concept of dragging something into a window. But certainly within your application window, you've got touch gestures. You can move things around. So little different kind of context when you think about drag and drop in the context of of that device. All right, I think we're going to end then. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.